U.S. tariffs came into effect in the early hours of this morning, and so did the Canadian response. Canada will be implementing 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods, starting with tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods immediately, and tariffs on the remaining $125 billion of American products in 21 days' time. Encore aujourd'hui, on se voit forcé d'imposer des droits de douane de 25% sur 155 milliards de dollars américains de marchandises.
$155 billion worth of U.S. products, 30 billion,
30 milliards de dollars de façon
30 billion immediately, and in 21 days, $120 billion worth of U.S.
Today, we will also be challenging these illegal actions by filing dispute resolution claims at the World Trade Organization and through the USMCA. But in the meantime, our tariffs will remain in place until the U.S. tariffs are withdrawn, and not a moment sooner. And should these tariffs not cease, we are in active and ongoing discussions with provinces and territories to pursue several non-tariff measures, measures which will demonstrate that there are no winners in a trade war. Now, just like I did a month ago, I want to speak first directly to the American people. We don't want this. We want to work with you as a friend and ally. And we don't want to see you hurt either. But your government has chosen to do this to you. As of this morning, markets are down, and inflation is set to rise dramatically all across your country. Your government has chosen to put American jobs at risk, at the thousands of workplaces that succeed because of materials from Canada or because of consumers in Canada, or both. They've chosen to raise costs for American consumers on everyday essential items like groceries and gas, on major purchases like cars and homes, and everything in between. They've chosen to harm American national security, impeding access to the abundant critical minerals, energy, building materials, and fertilizers that we have and that the United States needs to grow and prosper. They've chosen to launch a trade war that will, first and foremost, harm American families. They've chosen to sabotage their own agenda that was supposed to usher in a new golden age for the United States. And they've chosen to undermine the incredible work we've done together to tackle the scourge that is fentanyl, a drug that must be wiped from the face of the earth. So on that point, let me be crystal clear. There is absolutely no justification or need whatsoever for these tariffs today. Now, the legal pretext your government is using to bring in these tariffs is that Canada is apparently unwilling to help in the fight against illegal fentanyl. Well, that is totally false. Let's look at the facts. Our border is already safe and secure. Far less than 1% of fentanyl flows and less than 1% of illegal crossings into the United States comes from Canada. But we acted because we know we can always do better. We responded to concerns, including from the President, by implementing an ambitious $1.3 billion border plan. A border plan that includes generational investments in new AI and imaging tools to stop the flow of fentanyl in its tracks, stronger coordination and information sharing with American agencies, along with the deployment of drones, helicopters, and additional personnel to keep our border secure. Now, a month ago, as part of an agreement with the United States that paused the tariffs, we made further commitments. We appointed Kevin Brosseau as our fentanyl czar, a man who dedicated his multi-decade career in law enforcement to combating organized crime networks and drug trafficking. We designated 7 drug cartels, sick, evil groups who cynically profit off the pain and suffering of people on both sides of the border, as the terrorist organizations that they are. And just yesterday, we launched a new joint operations partnership supported by a $200 million investment between Canada's security and law enforcement agencies, a partnership that will enhance the coordination of information and intelligence in order to thwart criminal gangs involved in the illegal fentanyl trade. And critically, our actions are working. As the U.S. Customs and Border Protection just acknowledged, there was a 97% drop in fentanyl seizures from January compared to December, to a near zero low of less than half an ounce seized in January, even with all the further enforcements and actions we've taken at the borders. In sum, we stepped up. We engaged closely and constructively with the President and his administration. We did everything we promised. We stuck to our word. And we did it because we believe in working together to protect our citizens. Now I want to speak directly to one specific American, Donald. In the over 8 years you and I have worked together, we've done big things. We signed a historic deal that has created record jobs and growth in both of our countries. We've done big things together on the world stage, as Canada and the US have done together for decades, for generations. And now we should be working together to ensure even greater prosperity for North Americans in a very uncertain and challenging world. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do. We two friends fighting is exactly what our opponents around the world want to see. And now, to my fellow Canadians, I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together, because that's what we do. We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help. But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you. We will defend Canadian jobs. We will take measures to prevent predatory behavior that threatens Canadian companies because of the impacts of this trade war, leaving them open to takeovers. We will relentlessly fight to protect our economy. We will stand up for Canadians every single second of every single day because this country is worth fighting for. Les derniers mois ont été stressants et honnêtement épuisants
and really tiring for all of us,
je crois qu'on peut
but I think
être rassuré par
we can be
l'incroyable
reassured
solidarité
by the incredible solidarity that our society showed with our companies, civil society, and indigenous society. The entire society is unanimous. We have to talk to our American partners. Those tariffs are a very bad idea.
On
At the
travaille
same
à
time,
l'interne pour faire
working
tomber les obstacles au
internally
commerce
to
entre nos
eliminate
provinces et territoires. On travaille pour
obstacles
rejoindre de nouveaux
between
marchés à travers le
trade
monde,
between our
pour
states,
bâtir une économie
and to
toujours plus
find new
forte et plus
markets throughout the world,
résiliente.
to have better economy,
Dans les
more
dernières
solid,
années,
more
j'ai eu
robust.
plusieurs occasions
The
de
last
discuter avec des leaders
years,
du monde
I
entier.
discussed
Mon
with leaders
message
all
est
over the
toujours le
world.
même.
My message
Le
hasn't
Canada
changed.
est un
Canada
partenaire
is
fiable et notre
reliable
porte est
partner,
grande ouverte.
and our doors are open.
Dans les dernières semaines, on a
During the
aussi
last
redoublé
week,
d'efforts pour renforcer nos
we
liens
made
avec le Mexique,
more efforts
qui a lui
to
aussi été
increase our
frappé par ces
collaboration with
tarifs.
Mexico, that is also a victim of these
Ensemble,
tariffs.
on va chercher de nouvelles façons
Together,
de collaborer,
we will
de
find
s'appuyer
other
l'un
ways
sur
of
l'autre pour faire
working
face à cette
and
menace.
rely one with each other
Face à
to
l'incertitude,
confront
face
this.
à l'inquiétude, les Canadiens
With
ont fait preuve
confronted
de
with this
tellement de solidarité.
uncertainty,
Je vous ai
Canadians
vu
are
partager des
show
listes de
much
produits
solidarity.
canadiens pour aider vos proches à appuyer
You
les entreprises
share
d'ici.
products
Je vous ai vu
to help
changer vos plans de
companies.
vacances
I
et opter pour des
I
magnifiques
saw you
destinations
change
touristiques qu'on a
travel
ici
plans
chez nous, au Canada.
to stay, remain in
Je
Canada,
vous ai vu redoubler
and
d'efforts
I
pour soutenir
saw
nos
that
petites
you were making
entreprises
more
et nos
efforts
travailleurs.
to support small
Je vous ai
businesses
vu vous
and
porter à la
workers.
défense de notre
I saw
culture,
that you
la faire
defended your
rayonner.
culture to
Je vous
make
ai
it
vu
shine even
encourager
more.
nos
I
athlètes
saw you
avec une
encourage
ferveur
your
sans
athletes
précédent.
with unwavering
Moi
support
qui croyais que je ne
and
pouvais pas être
enthusiasm.
plus fier de notre
I
pays
cannot
et de mes
be
compatriotes,
more proud of my
mais
fellow
j'ai encore
Canadians.
quelque chose à vous
But
demander.
there's something else I want to ask
Lâchez pas.
from
C'est
you.
le moment de
Do not
redoubler d'efforts,
abandon,
de se tenir
do
debout
not
pour notre pays, de faire
fight for
tout
your
ce qu'on
country.
peut pour
Do
choisir le
everything you
Canada,
can
pour
to
défendre
choose
le Canada.
Canada, to defend
On va
Canada.
passer ensemble à travers
We
des
will go
moments
through
difficiles.
these
Après
difficult
vous avoir
times
vu
together.
aller dans les dernières semaines, j'ai jamais été aussi
I've
optimiste
I've never
quant au
been
futur
so
de notre beau pays,
optimistic after seeing
malgré
how you
tous
have
les défis qu'on va
reacted
être en train de
in the
vivre ensemble.
past weeks, and we will
Le
go through.
Canada
We will
reste le
survive
meilleur
these
pays sur Terre. On a tellement de
difficult
raisons
times.
d'être fiers
Canada
de
is
notre
the
chez
best
nous, de
country
ces
in the world.
quelques arpents de
There are
neige.
reasons to be so
Mais surtout,
proud of this country and
je suis fier
this
de notre capacité
snowy
de nous
country,
serrer les
and
coudes
I
quand vient
am
le temps.
proud of our
Les
solidarity, our
Canadiens ont
capacity to
différentes
weather the
origines,
storm.
différentes langues, différentes croyances.
We have
Mais
different
quand vient le temps de
origins,
défendre
different
notre
languages,
pays,
but when it
on
comes
le
to
fait
defending
d'une
our
seule
country,
voix, main dans
we
la
are
main.
one.
À travers vents et marées, les Canadiens
Through the
peuvent
storm,
toujours compter
Canadians can
les uns
always
sur les autres.
on each other.
Now, we've
on one
been
another.
through tough spots before. But every time we've faced long odds and seemingly insurmountable obstacles, we've not only survived, we've emerged stronger than ever. Because when it comes to defending our great nation, there is no price we all aren't willing to pay. And today is no different. Merci beaucoup, mes amis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Merci beaucoup. We will now take 20 minutes of questions. Nous prendrons 20 minutes de questions. One question, one follow-up, une question, un suivi. Merci.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry with CBC. You're reaching out to the president today. You're speaking directly to him. We heard from U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who says that Donald Trump will be speaking to Canadians. And he also says that he wants to see more progress on fentanyl. So my question to you is, do you have any conversation scheduled with Donald Trump in the coming days? Is that something maybe your successor should do? And do you really believe that this is about fentanyl, or is there something larger at play here?
I have offered to speak to Donald over the past number of days, and I expect to speak with him in the days to come. I'm always there to talk with him about the importance of working together to take on the world at this time. The facts show very clearly that in terms of taking action on fentanyl, we are doing everything that is necessary, and not just for the United States, for ourselves as well, as Canadians are suffering as well from the scourge that is illegal fentanyl. We have laid out extensive plans, actions, cooperations, including as recently as the past days in Washington, and they have always been very well received. And the numbers bear that out. I think in what President Trump said yesterday, that there is nothing Canada or Mexico can do to avoid these tariffs, underlines very clearly what I think a lot of us have suspected for a long time, that these tariffs are not specifically about fentanyl, even though that is the legal justification he must use to actually move forward with these tariffs.
Monsieur Trudeau, en français, à part l'allocution que vous avez eue envers Monsieur Trump, lui avez-vous parlé au cours des
After
derniers
the
jours, des dernières heures?
Have you talked to
Non.
Mr.
Je
Trump
me suis mis
besides
à sa
that
disposition
conversation
pour
a
parler
few
pendant les
days
derniers
ago?
jours, comme on avait fait il y a 30 jours.
We,
J'espère lui parler dans
I
les
hope
jours à venir. Je suis toujours
talk to
ouvert
him,
pour parler.
to him in the future.
You mentioned this
My
off the
door is
top.
open.
You're seeing the United States seemingly moving closer to Moscow. This is the same day that the United States has announced it's suspending aid for Ukraine. The Kremlin just said that U.S. foreign policy now is in alignment with Russia. So how do you successfully, or your successor, successfully negotiate with a president who seems to regard his friends as his enemies and his enemies as his friends?
In this regards, Canada and Canadians are very clear. We know who our friends are. We know who our opponents are. And there is no question that Vladimir Putin and his attack not just on Ukraine, but on the rules-based international order, on the founding principles of the United Nations, is an opponent of Canada. I think the question that we all need to be watching closely is, what do the American people think? How do Americans feel about jettisoning one's friends and allies in favor of a country that has never wished Americans well and continues to act in ways that harm the global economy and specifically the American economy and American values and principles?
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Valérie Gavage de Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada.
Sur les programmes d'aide, au Québec, on parle de 160 000 emplois qui pourraient être
we talk about
perdus.
160,000 jobs that could be lost.
Dans les usines d'auto. Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose sur la table
Carbon.
aujourd'hui
Is
qui peut
there
être lancé
something,
pour les
a plan
Canadiens, ne serait-ce que
on the
de
table
limiter le délai pour avoir
to
accès à
limit
l'assurance emploi?
the delay to have access to employment, workers' compensation? I want to remind people that our objective is not to find ways so Canadians can go through these terrible times. It's to prevent these terrible times to last longer than the minimum time necessary. We can eliminate these tariffs tomorrow. That's what we're going to try to do. Our priority is to end this commercial trade war.
Le fait que des Américains, dès aujourd'hui, font faire face
already
à
today
des mises à pied,
be
vont faire
confronted
face
with
des problèmes
layoffs,
au niveau de leur
difficulties with regards to
vont
their
nous aider à mettre fin à ces défis le plus
this will
rapidement
help us
possible.
to
Mais
end
effectivement,
these
on est en
problems
train
as
de
soon as
regarder
possible.
toutes sortes
We're
de choses
considering
que nous
many
pourrons
things
faire si
that we
effectivement
can
ces
do
tarifs durent
if these
plus
tariffs
longtemps
last
qu'une
longer
journée ou deux,
than
même
one or
avec des
two
actions
days,
quasiment
even with
immédiates sur l'assurance emploi qu'on va
immediate
regarder aujourd'hui même.
actions with the workers'
I think the thing to
compensation,
remember first and
employment
foremost as we
insurance.
reflect on the impacts on Canadian workers and Canadian jobs and businesses is that, first of all, there will be similar impacts on Americans losing their jobs, American families paying more for basic goods that they rely on at a time where times are tight everywhere. But our focus has to be on getting these tariffs lifted as quickly as possible. What can we do in the coming days is our focus to make sure that these tariffs don't last a second longer than necessary. So we will be looking at, including looking in the coming day at things we can do around adjusting EI to support people through this difficult time. But our priority has to be not on figuring out how to manage through these tariffs over the coming days and weeks and months, but on doing everything we can to get them lifted and put an end to this unjustified trade war that hurts American families and Canadian families.
On a l'impression que vous n'avez plus beaucoup de cartes dans votre jeu. Est-ce que
You don't have
de
any cards
devancer
in your
la renégociation de la CEUM fait partie des
to
plans
go
actuellement?
forward, accelerate the renegotiation? Is that something that you plan?
Actuellement, dans les conversations
Currently,
avec
in the
le
conversations
président,
with the president,
c'est pas très clair ce qu'il
it's
veut.
not very clear what's going on.
Ou peut-être la
Or
seule
maybe
clarté, c'est ce qu'il a dit à multiples
What is
reprises,
clear
que son
is what he
but,
said to
c'est
several
de
times
faire
that his
reculer
objective is
l'économie
to
canadienne,
kill
pour ensuite
Canadian
pouvoir parler
economy,
d'annexation.
to
C'est
talk
ce qu'il
about
veut.
annexation.
Alors,
That's what he wants.
je ne sais pas
So I don't know
quelle négociation on pourrait entamer
negotiation we could
actuellement
start
pour
currently
éviter, pour
to avoid
lui convaincre que c'est pas ça son
to convince him that that shouldn't be his
aujourd'hui
goal. Our answer today
est ancré dans le fait de
is
démontrer à
anchored.
quel point
We
nos
want to
économies
show
sont interreliées.
how
Et
our
si on
economies
crée des
are
barrières
intertwined,
entre nos
and if we
économies,
create
les
obstacles,
familles des deux côtés de la frontière vont
families in both
souffrir.
sides of the border
Pour
will suffer.
démontrer que on
to
devrait être
show
en train de
that
faire des
we
choses ensemble.
should do things
Et
together.
pendant qu'il
And while
fait le choix de
he's
vouloir
choosing to
ruiner l'économie canadienne,
ruin Canadian economy,
je ne sais pas si
I don't
devancer
know
des négociations dans une situation de
to
si mauvaise
accelerate
foi dans laquelle on se trouve
with
maintenant,
in such
où
bad
il amène
faith
des
that
tarifs
the bad
sans
faith we see that
aucune justification
with
factuelle
with
aujourd'hui.
by putting tariffs that have
Je
no
sais pas si d'ouvrir
justification
les
at all.
négociations.
I
On serait
don't know
toujours ouvert
if
à le faire s'il le voulait,
we
mais c'est
are
pas
open
un
to
enjeu
those
dont on va parler,
negotiations.
pour le présent.
But currently, no.
I'm just trying to remember. What was that? CUSMA, that's right. I think in terms of what he wants, and I heard he talked about banking again this morning in a tweet, which doesn't make any sense because American banks, there's about 16 American banks currently active in Canada holding about $113 billion worth of assets in this country. So the American banks are alive and well and prospering in Canada. It's an example of not really being able to see what it is that he wants, because even the excuse that he's giving for these Paris tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false. So we actually have to fold back on the one thing he has said repeatedly, that what he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us, is the second half of his thought. Now, first of all, that's never going to happen. We will never be the 51st state. But yeah, he can do damage to the Canadian economy, and he's started this morning. But he is rapidly going to find out, as American families are going to find out, that that's going to hurt people on both sides of the border. Americans will lose jobs. Americans will be paying more for groceries, for gas, for cars, for homes, because we have always done best when we work together. So we are, of course, open to starting negotiations on the CUSMA review, but let us not fool ourselves about what he seems to be wanting. And I will admit, I have been holding out hope that these tariffs were just a clever negotiating ploy that would have the impact that they're having now without even bringing them in over the past weeks, as we've seen order books dry up for Canadian companies from American customers, as we've seen expansion plans in Canada put on hold, as we've seen people choosing to invest in the United States over the past weeks because of the threat of tariffs. But now that he's moved forward with tariffs, we're going to see the real impact of a trade war between our two countries. And that impact will be to hurt American families.
Prime Minister Tonda McCharles with the Toronto Star. I hope you can be as specific as possible for a number of these points. Everybody's looking to what actually you're going to do. In your statement last night, you referenced non-tariff measures, and I want to know exactly what you're prepared to contemplate there. And given that your likely successors, both Carney and Poilievre, have said it should be dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs, that's on $600 billion worth of American imports. If you were to do that, is that on or off the table?
I will be sitting down, as I have every week for the past many, many weeks, with the premiers this afternoon to talk about our individual, combined, and collective response to this. As we've put on the table, the federal government has $155 billion worth of tariffs that we can move forward with immediately and that we will be moving forward with both now and 21 days from now to give Canadian companies time to adjust their supply chains to not be overly impacted by this. But there are many other things that have been surfaced by different premiers in different approaches that we can look at. One, for example, is around purchasing and around suppliers and around contracts, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, with American companies. There are many different things that we've been looking at, and that conversation with the premiers this afternoon is going to be very, very important. But I can tell you what we have seen is Canadians across provinces and territories, across political lines, are united in knowing that this is a time to hit back hard and to demonstrate that a fight with Canada will have no winners. And the sooner we can get past this fight, back to working together to take on the world, as our two countries always have, the better we'll all be.
To what extent have you turned or gotten cooperation from any other allies to exact more pain on the U.S. to accelerate getting to a solution? And are you concerned that Mexico appears to be trying to do their own thing maybe next Sunday? Where are you with any guarantees you've got allies?
I've just spent quite a bit of time over these past couple of weeks meeting with European and international allies to talk about a number of different things, including standing up for the rules-based order by defending Ukraine, but also being there for each other in a more challenging and uncertain world. And I can tell you that every country is very, very aware that if the American government is willing to do this to their own closest ally, neighbor, and friend, everyone is vulnerable to a trade war. And our ability to work together thoughtfully and strategically to make sure we're supporting our citizens, we're doing things together in a more diversified way is something that is on the mind of all of our allies.
En français, vous en êtes où dans les discussions avec les alliés, que ce soit européens ou mexicains?
Where are you at with the conversation with your allies? With several of our allies and our friends from Europe and international, everybody's worried. They know that if Americans are ready to do this to Canada, the closest ally and interconnected partner, everybody risks the same. Our capacity to work together, to do more together, to diversify supply chains more in an even more deliberate manner. That's the conversation that we're having, and we're continuing to have with the allies. With our Mexican partners, we remain in contact with them, close contact. And we're going to analyze how we can do things together, as I said, so we don't need to suffer more than necessary.
Prime Minister Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. As we know, the Liberal Party is going to be picking a new leader over the weekend, but when is it going to be your last official day as Prime Minister?
That will be up to a conversation between the new leader and myself to figure out how long a transition is needed. It should happen reasonably quickly, but there's a lot of things to do in a transition like this, particularly at this complicated time in the world.
My last day will be determined once the new leader of the Liberal Party has been chosen. That will be a conversation about how long will be required to make that transition. There are many different elements to be considered, but I know that we want to do it quickly.
So it sounds like it won't be immediately on March 9th or March 10th. So it sounds like you'll probably still have some time remaining to put in some more actions on this. Is one of those things that you're considering going to be taxing oil, gas, and potash exports, even if premiers don't consent to that?
As I said, the most important thing we're facing, as I've said, the most important thing we can do is ensure that Canadians remain united. That's why whatever response, individually or collectively, we do across the country, we have to make sure that no single part of the country is carrying a greater burden or suffering any more than everyone else. This is going to be tough for all of us, but we need to be pulling and holding Canadians together every step of the way. And that's the conversation I'm going to be having with the premiers this afternoon in our now weekly meetings. There will be many different ideas we discuss, but the most important thing, more important than doing specific or effective pressure points on the United States, is keeping Canadians united together. As we go through the pain that these American tariffs will inflict on our economy, on our workplaces, on Canadian families, we will be able to say this is happening to us by the decisions of a different government. As American families suffer the impact of these tariffs, of this trade war with Canada, they will be saying this is happening because our own government is choosing to do it to us. That's a very different proposition. And the most important thing right now, more important than anything else, is for Canadians to remain united. And that's why all premiers will be focused on things that make sure Canadians don't get divided amongst ourselves. This is a time for us to pull together, because the Americans will be having very real and very challenging debates and discussions about these actions. There will be no debate in Canada about whether or not we should be pulling together and responding. Everyone is aligned on that, and protecting that is job one for the Canadian government and the Canadian Prime Minister.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau.
Okay. Évidemment,
clearly, there are different things that different provinces and sectors can do to put pressure on the United States. Many ideas have been put on the table, but I want to be very clear. One region or industry in Canada will not suffer or carry a larger burden than others. We need to be fair with our response and our supports. And the most important thing in all of this is that Canadians remain united. And that's what I spoke about with the premiers of the provinces and territories this afternoon.
L'unité de mission et de courage et de détermination.
Mission, courage, and determination. All of these values that Canadians will be showing in the days and weeks to come will be our strongest weapon.
Les familles canadiennes qui vont faire face à
the
des
Canadian
impacts
families
négatifs à
that
cause
will
de ces
be
tarifs
negatively affected by these tariffs will be saying to themselves, we will stand united as Canadians because it's another country that is doing this to us. We will stand together and we'll get through this. American families that will see lost jobs, price hikes, and more because of these tariffs, they will say to themselves, this is because of our own government that we are suffering now. And that's going to lead to very difficult conversations amongst Americans, discussions on why this trade war, this unjustified war is happening.
Follow-up. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Mackenzie Gray with Global. You mentioned the markets earlier. Someone who knows a thing about them, Warren Buffett, came out and said that these tariffs could be viewed as an act of war. Does the Canadian government believe these tariffs from Donald Trump is an act of war from the U.S.?
Canadians are not angry at the American people for this. We don't have anything against Americans. Americans are our neighbors, our friends, our partners. We do things together. We've done things together for decades and generations. This is a policy decision by the American government designed to go after the Canadian economy. This is a trade war, yes. But Canadians are hurt. Canadians are angry. We're going to choose to not go on vacation in Florida or Old Orchard Beach or wherever. We're going to choose to try to buy Canadian products and forego bourbon and other classic American products. And yeah, we're probably going to keep booing the American anthem. But let me tell Americans, we're not booing you. We're not booing your teams. We're not booing your players. We're booing a policy that is designed to hurt us. And we're insulted. And we're angry. But we're Canadian, which means we're going to stand up for each other. We're going to fight. And we're going to win.
There are probably a lot of folks watching on TV today who've been laid off or they were told not to come into work today because of these tariffs. Can you explain to them why you've not announced any relief measures today to help those folks out?
As I've said, our entire focus has been on preventing these tariffs from coming in, if there was at all a way, and it now looks like there was never a way we were going to be able to avoid these tariffs that the president was determined to do. And our focus now is going to be on making sure that they get lifted and that there is an end to this trade war as quickly as possible. But over the past month, we have been working on measures that if these tariffs last longer than a few hours or a few days, we be able to help Canadian citizens, Canadian workers, Canadian companies make it through this time. But let's also be clear, this is going to be tough. The American trade war is going to hurt the Canadian economy and is going to hurt all of us. What our government needs to make sure we're doing is try to make sure that nobody goes hungry and that everyone carries their share of this. And that's a hard thing to do, but that's where we're leaning in, both as a federal government and with provinces and territories on responses to be there for Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.